What if I
Good morning, everybody. I need a mic check. Can I get some thumbs up if you can hear me? Awesome. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Nice to see your smiling faces. Just before we kick off, I'd like to, for us all to just take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're all meeting from, wherever we are today, and to pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'd like to do a quick welcome to the team. So if the team, when I mention your name, if you just whack your hand up so people can see you. Ross, Gabby, Rachel, thank you. Board members this morning, we've got Alex Berry from Alex Berry Fine Wines. He's our deputy chair, one of our deputy chairs. We've got Celeste Pearce with us this morning. She is our treasurer from Business Edge Accountants, and Steve Owens from E2E, the change agency. We're also graced with the presence of a few councillors this morning. Whether they've logged in yet or not, I'm not too sure, but I'll read them out anyway. We've got Alice Glacken, we've got Henk van der Ven and David Thurley with us. Also from Albury City, we've got Tracy Squire, Deputy CEO, Anthony McFarlane, Team Leader of Economic Development, and Ange Larkin, Economic Development Officer. And a very special welcome to Justin Clancy, Member for Albury. Who we will hear from a little bit later on. Importantly, I'd really like to extend a massive heartfelt thanks to our sponsors. Without our sponsors, we cannot do what we do. I'd like to thank our platinum sponsors, Albury City, Qantas, HRB Insurance Brokers, Blacklocks Lavington, Telstra and NBN Co. Our media partner, 1494 2AY, our gold sponsors, Harwood Andrews and IBT, our silver sponsors, Shoreway Employment Training, and bronze sponsors, Integrity, Total HRM, PRD Real Estate Albury, RSM Australia, and Peter Stewart. We thank you so much for your support, your continued support through some pretty turbulent times, and to be able to make mornings like this able to happen. I'd also like to extend a quick welcome to anyone who is new to Chamber and new to Business Before Hours. So we hope that you enjoy this morning, and we hope you get a good download of information that's relevant to you. These topics do change quite a lot. We don't expect that everyone will be relevant to you, but we hope that at least at some point through the year you'll find one that is right up your alley. Before we kick off into our presentations this morning, just a quick snapshot of what we've been up to here at Chamber. The team have been working frantically. We're kind of like ducks when it's all calm up top and paddling like crazy down below. We've been working very tirelessly to advocate on behalf of you guys to try and get some kind of some relief, I guess, through the pretty challenging restrictions that have been imposed on us as businesses. And I'm really pleased to say that we've had a bit of a win with the JobKeeper revision, which is fantastic because that's a long-term benefit for us. But there's still more work to be done in terms of the border restrictions and the immediate impacts that has on business. So we will keep fighting the good fight for you. I do appreciate all the engagement and the input that you've provided, because that is what allows us to take these messages to these particular government departments and get your voice heard. You probably would have noticed that we've consolidated some of our emails as well now, so you can expect to get a weekly email called the Snapshot. In the Snapshot, it is all the immediate stuff that can't wait for a monthly email, and the monthly newsletter is now called In the Know, and that will be a bit more of a detailed EDM out to you guys with a whole bunch of different information that should be relevant to you. In terms of events, given the current circumstances and the border closures, we are looking to keep all of our events online up until the end of the year, at which point we will reassess after that. Before we pass on to Jason Cox from Hansen Yuncken. Again, I'd just really like to thank you all for your emails and your calls, your questions. I know it's pretty challenging times out there, but if we can help you, please keep picking up the phone, keep emailing us. The team are here and ready to help you however we can. So, Jason, if you want to take yourself off mute and get yourself ready to share your presentation. We've got Jason Cox with us from Hansen Yuncken this morning. Jason's going to be talking on tips for tendering, which is a pretty hot topic at the moment on a lot of businesses' lips. And we're very lucky to have a powerhouse like Hansen Yuncken and Jason with us this morning. So Jason, over to you.
Thanks, Carrick. I'll just play with my screen a little bit. Righto. Okay, is my screen sharing? Well, good. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And I'd just like to quickly say thank you to Ross, Rachel, Gabby and Carrick for inviting me along this morning. I'd also like to say a big warm welcome from Hansen Yuncken to all the members, Albury Northside, councillors, Alice, and I think maybe Hank is there, Albury City staff, Anthony and Tracy. Justin, obviously, for spending some time with us today, and all the sponsors. It's a great opportunity for me to come along and introduce, I guess, Hansen Yuncken a little bit to businesses around the region, particularly in the Albury area, but more importantly, to share some of my ideas around tendering and what the benefits are and what it can do for your business. In terms of an agenda, and I'll try and get through this as quick as I can this morning. I'm quite mindful that business before hours is business before hours, and we don't need to be spending too much time. But in terms of tendering tips and what is good and what is bad, I'll run you through quickly around Hansen Yuncken and why I guess we've been asked to provide some tips to people, businesses, why we tender and why we think it's a good opportunity for others to be doing the same, what you may need to do and what you need to understand about if you're thinking of getting into the tender process, and how you present your tender, submissions, outcomes and takeouts.
Can I just quickly, I totally forgot, like I do every month. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to add them down in the chat feature and we can ask Jason at the end of his presentation. So sorry, Jason.
No, that's fine. Thanks, Garrett. It's quite prudent that I've been asked to present to you this morning. Currently, we've got around probably $180 to $200 million worth of projects either starting or finishing the tender process at the moment. So right in the middle of it, and it's quite at the forefront of what I've got in front of me at the moment. So hopefully some of the stuff that I bring to you today is relevant and people will have an opportunity to take some tips away and actually work on how they might improve their approach, I guess, to tendering and whether people actually feel it's worthwhile. Just quickly on Hansen Yuncken, we are a 95-year-old Australian-owned company. We've been working in Albury since 2000. I moved up here in 2006 from our office in Shepparton and opened the office here. So we've been permanently in Albury since 2006, the last 14 years. There's a bit of a snapshot on your screens as to the type of work that we've been doing around this region. The education, health, aged care, community, retail, justice. You can see the bulk of our work is government work, and I guess that'll be the focus of the tender process as I go forward today in talking to you guys around who do we tender to and how do we tender. There is a private tender process as well, but our focus and our business focus has been and will continue to be government clients, and they will they will range from locations from Wagga all the way down to Bendigo. We don't push as far into Canberra yet, but we will go further west, I guess, if need be. For our business, we undertake somewhere between $200 and $300 million worth of tenders each financial year. So you can see that's a big part of what we do. Probably 80% of those tenders would be government work. And of that government work, there's a success rate that we try to achieve, which is about a 1 in 4. If you're doing better than that, your turnover is going to improve. If you're doing less than that from a success perspective, then your tender is going to be down a little bit. So across the business, and just a quick snapshot, if we're doing $200 to $300 million of tenders, we're getting 1 in 4. If it's a 25% success rate, we're around $50 to $70 million worth of new work each year. And that's really our business model, and that's what we aim to achieve. From a business operation perspective, I guess 70% of our overhead would go to tendering. And whilst I'm probably talking with a lot of small to medium enterprises, it just gives an indication of the importance, I guess, to our business to be able to continue to operate and to be able to run, that we put or we place that much overhead into winning that work. Why do we tender? I guess from a construction industry perspective, the bulk of our work is tendered. It is a competitive market, so clients need to be getting value for money, and they need to be approaching the market to see what's around and who can offer a good solution to their projects that we look for. But apart from that, and apart from, I guess it is a necessity in our industry, it does offer increased workload, increased opportunity, continuity of work. And I guess when you start to look at benefits of tendering, it's not just those couple of dot points that we've put up there today, but you get your name around, you look at it as a marketing perspective. It's an opportunity to expose your business to different clients, and it's really it enables you to reach out beyond perhaps what you see immediately in front of you. So for us, the benefits of tendering are not just tendering to win work. They're creating new opportunities, they're creating new contacts. There's an ability to be seen in the market and to be active around the market, and that just creates brand identification through different areas. Where do we tender? Well, as I say, most of our work, I guess, is government work, and when we're looking at government work, we're looking at local, state and federal. There's the 3 different agencies, and each of those agencies and each of those will have a different approach to tendering and how you can get notified for tendering. So for anyone who's looking to get into tendering and for anyone who wants to expand their business, I'd suggest you start to look into those 3 different areas. Look at your local, your state and your federal government opportunities. There's websites available that you can access. There's people you can contact, and there's even webinars and seminars that you can attend that will help your business understand what you need to do for the tender process, and perhaps how that process can help you individually. I'm quite mindful today that I'm trying to slip away from the construction industry, because I do know that very well. But there's many businesses out there who can access government tenders, whether it be for purchasing, supplying materials, it can be supplying services. There's a myriad of opportunities out there for different businesses if you're able to access those opportunities. So have a look around, have a look at whether you're interested in going to a local, state or federal level in terms of what you want to supply, and give that, a little bit of a toe in the water test to see where that might take you. The other thing I put up there is look to support others in their tenders, and I guess that's driven by what we see in the construction industry, but I'm sure it's something that happens throughout other industries, where whilst we are tendering, we rely very heavily on our subcontractors and suppliers to support us in that process. And so therefore, whilst the businesses those businesses may not be able to or want to access, I guess, government funding and deliver projects at that level, they are able to access the opportunities through working with, say, Hansen Yuncken or other builders, or it could be other consultants, to prepare and submit a tender for whatever the government agency may be looking for. So I'd perhaps, use or recommend the use of resources around the region. Pull some resources together if you're interested in actually getting into the tender process and delivering something that might be a little bit beyond what your current capacity is, but it does give you the leverage, I guess, to get into that process and to start looking at how to increase your business and opportunities that might come with that. How do I tender? This is a big question. I guess the one thing that we try to identify first and foremost is our clients. And once you've got your client identified, it's understanding what they need. It's understanding the deliverables that they're looking for out of the tender process. So from our perspective, construction industry is predominantly time, cost, quality, and safety. They're the overarching items, but beyond that, clients can be looking for something else, and it's important to understand what that is, so that when you commence the tender process, you really can leverage that focus, I guess, into your submissions. Most clients will want more than just a standard tender, so it's about understanding those areas that they need, and perhaps identifying from your own perspective what smarts or what opportunities you can bring to the table that might be a little bit different from the standard type of tender response. Once you've understood your client, it's understanding whether that fits your business and making sure that it is an opportunity that you think that you can really leverage off and deliver. I think that's really important. If there's some doubt or uncertainty around your business and how you want to present or how you want to deliver something, then that uncertainty will come through your tender submission. And clients are really looking for certainty when they're going down a tender process. So demonstrating to the client that you are certain you can deliver, you've got a methodology, and you'll have a plan on how you're going to give them what they need, is really important. And the big part of that is understanding, does that fit your business? We like to make contact with our clients prior to a tender coming out if we can. Sometimes government agencies won't allow you to, and there's probity processes around tendering, particularly through government. So you need to be very careful that you don't cross any boundaries of probity, that you don't encourage people to discuss particular items with you around a tender that they shouldn't be. You need to be very black and white around that, but at the same time, it is good to let people know that you are very keen for their project, that you want to deliver their project for them, and that will be a priority for you and your business. So I would highly recommend that if you are getting into the tender process, make sure you work out who the people are to talk to. And if you can get to them and just let them know who you are, give them some information about your business and how important it would be for you to deliver something for them, then I think you'll be well underway to starting the tender process. Tendering does take a lot of planning. As I said, at the moment, we've got $180 million worth of tendering, and that requires a lot of resource. Irrespective if it's $2 million worth of tendering or $200,000 worth of tendering, it still takes resource. And you need, everyone I think needs to understand that if they're going down a tender process, there is quite tight, I guess, restraints around tendering normally, particularly for government, and that can be driven by time. Most of our tenders, we have 4 weeks to tender, 4 to 5 weeks. So you need to be ready to go. You need to have people available, and you need to consider what else you've got in front of you as to whether or not you can put 100% into the tender as it comes along. So what do you need to do? Make sure you've got your resource there. Make sure that, again, you've hopefully already understood your client, but if you understand the tender's coming and there's other things you need to gather for that tender, then it's important you plan for that before it arrives. For some of our tenders, we're talking to consultants, we're talking to subcontractors, suppliers before the tender comes in. We're lining them up, we're getting them ready so that when the tender does arrive, that we are right to go. Submission preparation. Government agencies, particularly state and federal, are asking for more and more out of our tender submissions. And if you're entering into the tender process, you can expect to be asked more and more. So it's not just a matter now of price, program, and a plan, I guess, of how you're going to get there. But we're seeing requirements along the lines of, okay, Hansen Yuncken, you're employing up to 100 people to deliver your works. We'd really like to encourage Indigenous, non-for-profit, underprivileged, disabled, females in the workforce, local involvement, local industry development planning. There's a number of other elements within the tender submission that will be a part of your submission. And if you are getting to that point of tendering, be prepared for not just planning the works, but also for how you're going to help the client, which is your client, deliver some of those important features of, not just being for us delivering a project, but for how we're going to help involve others into that process, and how we're going to help train, how we're going to employ apprentices, that type of thing. So yeah, it is important to understand that it's not just all about the delivery, it's also about other elements, and that needs to be written reasonably well into your submission. Currently, we're seeing 30% of our weightings go towards that type of response. How long we have to tender the works? Well, that's up to each client, but as I said, we work on a 4 or 5 week turnaround, so they are quick and they do need resource up front to get on top of. Some tips. I guess, look, from us, planning the time for the tender process is really important. At the start of each tender, if we've got a 4 week period, we'll sit down and we'll set ourselves milestones, I guess, for each tender, and try to stick to those along the way. So our price will be delivered by a certain date. We will have our program delivered by a certain date. We will have our response for this delivered by a certain date. And the importance is the person who's putting your tender together at the end needs to have time to pull all that together. And it's important to have that rigidity, I guess, around programming your tender. You've got the documents, depending on the type of tender. There could be a bucket load. We see a lot of documents come through. It's important that you read those and deliver those. So read your documents. There will be terms of contract, possibly. There will be terms of engagement. There will be brief documents. A client may ask you to attend a brief. Make sure you do. Really try to break out, I guess, from those documents the key points, and that way you can start to focus on your tender submission. Clients quite often will ask questions, will enable you to ask questions. You get responses. If you are asked a question, respond, I guess, and make sure you focus your focus on the tender is to get those responses back to the client. Most importantly, submit them on time. The tender process, particularly for government, is hard and fast. If it says the tender closes at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, make sure you get it in before then. 201 won't be accepted, particularly now on a number of the estimating and tendering portals. Once that 2 p.m. deadline hits, it's closed, so you won't get in. So make sure you give yourself enough time to get your tender prepared and submitted. In terms of your tender document, clear and concise responses are really important. Move away from generic responses, move away from company statements, move away from cliche comments. All clients want to see is, how are you going to do this for me? And how well can you do it? And how well you can do it will be reflected in your tender submission. So tender-wise, make it a clear and concise response. We do have, we don't have, we will do, we won't do, that type of thing. The document itself needs to be clear. It needs to be, I've got crisp down there on the screen, and crisp is about not making it confusing to read, not making it difficult to decipher. Avoiding waffle is what I've termed it there, but again, that's coming back to making it particular to your client's responses. So only put pictures and photos if they're relevant to the work. If they're not relevant to the work, if they're not relevant to the client, they fill a gap in a submission, but it doesn't add any weighting. It doesn't add value. And the final point that I've got there is actually quite important. Clients will have a number of submissions to review. If you've got a long-winded submission that fails to really hit the mark, they're going to put it down. And I liken it to getting a set of documents yourself and taking them home and trying to read the way through them. If you're going down that path and trying to read through something and you can't understand it and you're having difficulty, you're going to put it down and put it to the side. Remember, that's the way your client's reviewing your document, your submission. It needs to stand out. It needs to have something about it that the client says, oh, hang on, I really need to read this because these people are telling me something that is important, and they actually understand what I'm after. So yeah, keep your submissions clear and concise, and look, a lot of white background, a lot of simple wording. It all sounds quite simple, but when you actually sit down and trying to articulate it, it can get away from you a little bit. So just retaining that focus through a document is quite important. The actual submission, again, allow for on-time delivery, understand how you're going to get it delivered. A number of years ago for say defence, we would have to deliver to Canberra on a day by a time. And the delivery spot was a little hatch in an industrial estate in Canberra. And it would mean essentially driving to Canberra to deliver your tender. If that's what a client asks for and you're committed to that client, that's what you'll do, you need to do. If it's electronic copy, as I said before, understand what the parameters are around and downloading that document, and allow for download time, because internet can be slow. Particularly, we've had an issue where we've had people working from home and they've tried to download a document, internet's gone down, and we've missed tenders. So it does happen. So you really need to give yourself some time to get that submission downloaded. Once you've submitted, if a client comes back to you with questions, show them the respect that they deserve, and actually respond to them as quickly as you can. Let them know that you're working on their responses, and follow up and return those responses as quickly as possible. I guess with government tendering, one thing to understand is there's processes behind the scenes that require government agencies to follow, and those processes can take a while, and in some instances can take a long time before they can get to a point of recommending or even contracting with anybody in that tender. So it's good to follow up. It's good to understand where the tender process is at. I don't personally like to hound people. I understand that there's a process that they've got to follow, and that they'll come back to you as soon as they possibly can. But at the same time, it doesn't hurt just to touch base, let them know you're keen. Anything else needs to be provided, let me know, and we can follow through. It's important that your clients still understand that whilst the tender's gone in, you're thinking about them and that they're important to you. If you get a nice phone call, that's fantastic. A successful tender is great. If you don't, maybe not so great, particularly when a lot of effort goes into your tender submissions. But in the not so greats, we look at it as an opportunity. Well, okay, we've got to learn from that. We've got to understand what others did, or perhaps what we didn't do, and so therefore it's really important to seek feedback, and get that feedback as quickly and quickly as you can. Sorry, Rachel, I'm mindful of time. Importantly, once you've put your tender in, and if you've been successful, do what you say you will do, and I guess commit to delivering, and continue that communication with your client. Once you've been awarded a tender, the real stuff starts, and you need now to deliver, and hopefully through your planning earlier on that you've got that plan and you're ready to get going, because it's important to your client who've made that really important decision to work with you as a business, that you deliver for them. And the benefit of a successful delivery is actually repeat business. Quickly now, moving on to takeouts, and in a bit of a summary. Identify your clients or possible clients, engage, and really determine if there's a pipeline for your business. Understanding that pipeline of work will help you understand whether tendering is something that's important to you and something that you really want to have a go at. If you are going to give it a go, look at the time and resources to prepare a tender. Don't cut yourself short by not actually giving it a full attention. Understand what your clients are after. Answer all the tender schedules. Most government agencies will have schedules. They will want them completed to your best, and they will expect it to be completed. If you don't, you can be marked down. So expect some paperwork, expect that you need to pull some of that together. We don't win all the tenders. It's just a part of the process. Make sure you get a debrief, but if you are in that process, stay true to it and keep going. And finally, once you will improve your tender outcomes, I guess, by doing them more and more. You'll improve your tender opportunities and future work by delivering once you've actually won a tender. So it's a circular approach to tendering. Tendering develops relationships, develops work, and more opportunities for more tenders. And it's a fairly simple process, but it takes a lot of work to get there. So for us, obviously, it's an important part of our business and something that we need to do. And I think for those of you who want to or are considering getting into the tender game, it's a great opportunity to increase your turnover and perhaps get your name further out into the areas that will assist you in growing your business. Rach, I'm sort of coming to an end now. I hope I haven't overrun time too much. I've flown through that a little bit, but it's yeah, it's always a little bit hard when you can't get feedback along the way.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, look, we're running a little bit behind. So what I might do, we've got a couple of questions that we've had asked. We might actually field them offline, send them to you and try and get some responses for those individuals. There's not many, but just so that we can get those questions answered. Jason, thank you so much. I guess the key takeouts for me was kind of learning that it is a bit of a marketing opportunity for people or businesses to get involved in tendering. Which is probably easily forgettable. The opportunities for upscaling and understanding your client and the process, I think, sounds like it's a pretty critical part in that. And also, I think it sounds like there's a lot of opportunity in finding out who you should be talking to, with your clients as well, and making every opportunity to make yourself known as well and to learn about them. So. Yeah, that's great, Jason. Thank you very much. If you want to stop sharing your screen now, we'll pass over to Elizabeth Sayers from Albury City. Elizabeth is here to talk to us about some tips for grant writing or grant applications, a very relevant thing at the moment. Grants are going to be a very busy space at the moment. So, Elizabeth, you're going to be run off your feet in the next foreseeable future, and just take yourself off mute as well. There you go. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Firstly, thank you very much for the opportunity to present this morning, and welcome everybody. I think for the most part, what I've just learned, which I didn't realise, you can take the word tender out and pop the word grant in. The processes are very similar, so apologies, there's going to be a bit of duplication here. My name's Elizabeth, I'm from Albury City, I'm the Community Development Officer, so my role is quite varied, but part of my role covers the grant process for Albury City in relation to community and cultural grants, as well as the financial assistance grants that Council offers. So predominantly community-based and infrastructure, but the process is much the same. So I'll take you through the hints and tips for what to do and how to try to be successful. So the first steps essentially in the process are to know what you want. If you can't articulate to somebody in a quick 30-second elevator pitch, you probably aren't in a place to apply for a grant. It's critical to know what you want and to know what your options are in terms of where to find the grant that you're looking for. And in the notes that I've sent to Rachel with this presentation, there are some grants that I've looked for that may be relevant to you. I did also find that Albury City has uploaded some information about grants, particularly in the current environment with COVID-19. So mindful that small businesses and businesses are struggling, and there's lots being done to try and assist. So have a look at that and see if there's anything of relevance to you. But it is important to make sure when you're looking at the grant that you are eligible for application. So some grants specifically are for non-profits, which means if you're not in that space, you won't be eligible to apply. Others very much require you to have certain things in place. So the documents and supporting evidence that was mentioned earlier, it's important to know what's there and to enable yourself to have the time frame to put those processes in place and ensure that you have the ability to put the information together that's required to support your application. In addition to that, the next steps, once you've decided what you're looking for, where you're able to, so very valid point previously, some grants don't enable you to contact the funder. They're quite stringent around a process that you follow and all the assistance is provided online. So it's important to look at the ins and outs of each one. They can be extremely different. At Council, we take, I suppose, a community approach. We're trying to help the community and support them, so we're a bit more flexible around the assistance that we provide. But government departments, you know, they may get thousands of applications, so they simply don't have capacity to field every single question, and they try to put as much information as they can online. The issue obviously is you just want to know one little bit of detail and unfortunately you can't make contact. But where you can, I absolutely encourage you to have a conversation, state your claim, see if your own values align. It's quite important, I think, if you're looking to fund something, to have similar values to the funder. If there's no alignment, then you probably ethically wouldn't want to go down the path of getting money from someone you don't have an alignment with. In a place like Albury, if you've had the conversation with a funder, it can place you ahead of others simply because you've reached out. It's a little bit like a job application. Having that conversation gives you a bit of information and insight, but also enables the funder to understand who you are, what you're looking for, and whether or not they might have some suggestions to make other funding opportunities that they may refer you through to other places, because usually they're quite well across what opportunities exist. So it's important to make that contact where you're able to and just have that conversation. You should also consider partnerships. It may enhance your application if you can work with others to build a relationship and to make a submission together, or to work with each other in relation to some strengths you may have or some gaps you may have. So if you're looking to employ someone and the funding opportunity is for 30 hours a week, for instance, and you only need them for 10, if you're able to partner and the other organisation has the offset, then that may assist, but also make a more robust application. So consider all those things before you put pen to paper, as it were, and just seek options. It does require a lot of lead time. Most grants are usually advertised. It's not quite as stringent as the tendering process. There's a lot more notification around when they're coming up, but the lead time in terms of making a submission is quite tight. So they might get released the middle of the month and they're due by the end of the following month. So the turnaround time from go to woe isn't particularly long, but you normally know that they're coming. So you can do that lead time and have an understanding of what is best for you to apply for. It also doesn't hurt to apply for many. You just normally need to state within your application that you have sought funding elsewhere and how that funding will be used in relation to what you're seeking from that particular funder, just so that duplication doesn't occur and it's transparent. And also because of conflict of interest, etc. So from there, what to include, this is where it may well be that you need to supply supporting documents, or it just isn't a matter of knowing what's your lead time. Do you need those additional documents? Do you need a letter of support? How much information? Some grants cap you at your word limit. That's where your ability to be succinct but tell the story is quite important. So just like the tender process, nobody needs to know that you're going to use a red vehicle to deliver your goods if the process is all about seeking an additional person to employ to boost your business. So keep it short, be precise, and be mindful that, as was stated before, there are lots of submissions that come in. So you do need to make yours stand out and make it relevant and pertinent and speak to the person that's reading your document. But you also need to assume they know nothing. So you can't make an assumption that they're going to know you're employing 5 people with the look to double that employment field, for instance. You need to make it clear so that when the person reads your application, they know, oh, okay, you're looking to double your business, double your numbers of employees, etc., etc. It should not be vague, and it certainly shouldn't be unclear as to what you're doing, because that will absolutely put you at the bottom of the pile. From a local perspective, if you're seeking to paint the picture about the dire situation that might be, let's call it unemployment at this point, very pertinent, it's important to put that local information in. I've embedded within the notes of this some options for where you can find that data and that information. It just means that you know what's going on and you're able to demonstrate that from an evidence base, rather than saying, oh, unemployment's bad, I've heard that. The anecdotal information is great, but from a seeking grant funding, it absolutely works best to put those specifics in and be able to say, I know in Albury the unemployment rate is X, and it used to be Y, and in this time frame it's changed from what it was to what it is, and I'm trying to respond to that. That just also shows that you are very much on top of the situation as it's changing, and that you know how locally things are going. You can start wide and go from a national or state perspective in terms of unemployment levels, and then you can drill down. If it's about youth unemployment, you can absolutely put the numbers in relation to the youth that you're trying, if that's your focus to employ, if that's your grant that you're looking to do. But it is important to be able to demonstrate what's going on locally in order to say you're responding to that need as it happens. So lastly, you've got to the point where you're looking to submit. You think you're all ready to press that submit button, but that's where you do need to make sure you've got your supporting documentation ready. But before you even do the submit, I absolutely encourage you, where you've got time and capacity, to reread your document, and ideally have someone else to read the document for you. If they read your document and find mistakes, fantastic, they can fix them up. But if it doesn't make sense to them, then that tells you everything that you actually think you've told your story, but in actual fact, no, they don't understand what you're looking to do and why you're looking to apply. So a fresh set of eyes is critical to get the ability to have somebody give you feedback, and also to make sure that you're, where you need to be. Check for currency and update. If you've put your statistics in and you've cited something from last year, be mindful that that may have changed, particularly in an employment environment or business and marketing. Make sure that you check your information before you submit to make it that it is current, because if you're not current, that won't look too good in your application if you've cited information that's not relevant or is old. So it's important before you do that final submission just to make sure that the information is relevant, is accurate, and is resembling your current situation. It is highly competitive, as was stated before. So sometimes it's not about the fact that you didn't do a very good application, it's simply that somebody else was able to outshine you. I encourage you, where you can, if you've got budget capacity and you're short-timed yourself, you don't have much time or there's not much capability, consider a grant writer. The grant writers work in this space all the time, and as much as it might be a government or a philanthropic or a local government that they're looking to get funding from, the process is much the same. Once you've got a good application to go with, you can cut and paste. Don't reinvent the wheel. Absolutely use what you've done before and just finesse it to the relevant one that you're applying for at the time. And always make sure that you read everything and make sure that you check everything off. Absolutely, that's correct with a grant as well. It's highly unlikely that you'll be able to make a late submission. At council, sometimes we can be a bit nice about it and let you, but in a state government or federal, you absolutely won't. 201 won't cut it. If it's 2 o'clock, that you need to have it up. And it's absolutely the same with the grant process in terms of your documents being uploaded, your submission being made. You need to allow time for that. And if there's a hard copy required in the post, then know that before you go to do it, because the assumption is not good and then you've lost your opportunity. Grants usually recur, so sometimes it's one-off, sometimes that's that you've lost your chance, but often, particularly community-based or local government, they are ongoing. Council builds them into their budget process each year, so if you do happen to miss one year, you can luckily enough go again, but absolutely reach out, have the conversations and talk to the people involved where you can, to build those relationships and gain that understanding about what you're looking to do, and you never know, it might just place you a bit better from your one to the next. I think that's me. So I was mindful of time. So if there are any questions, please pop them in the chat box, or my details are there. You can contact me afterwards. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Elizabeth. That's fantastic. And yeah, it's really interesting to see the synergies there between grants and tendering. I think you touched on the values and aligning with the funder. I think that's a pretty critical thing. Whilst money is good, it's good to have that, the money coming from someone who understands, your values as well. And conversation with the funders and the opportunities that can come out of that sounds like it's a really good area to focus on, because it's not just about submitting something, it's about finding out, what makes them tick as well, what they're looking for in an application, and making sure that the right content is in there. I think, like you said, the over or under, subscribing, I think sounds like it's a pretty key thing in having an efficient and a productive submission. And what really appeals to me, I think, and resonates across both grants and tenders is like you said, not reinventing the wheel, having a template and something that's transferable across, many applications. So we will definitely circulate both presentations to all of our members after this morning. and we will include your contact details on there as well, Elizabeth, for any follow-up questions. So thank you so much. We're really grateful for your time this morning. And Justin Clancy, member for Albury, I do apologise for running a little bit over, but thank you so much for sparing some time to have a chat with us this morning. I know it's been an extremely busy period for you, and you're probably fielding questions left, right and centre, and you're probably keen for a bit of a break, but I just wanted to express our gratitude for speaking with us this morning.
Thanks, Carrick. Thank you. And Carrick, Rachel, and directors as well. Thanks to Northside and for the work that you're doing as well. And in starting for me, I want to certainly acknowledge the impact on our businesses, business owners and business people at this stage. It's these are as testing conditions, you know, for me that I know will impact on both the business organisation, but also at the personal level. And I know in my own, you know, when I feel stress, I know for me the most stressful period in my life was actually going through the GFC as a, you know, as a business owner in that regard, and the impacts, both financial in terms of cash flow, but also impacts on your human resourcing. And I can appreciate, you know, with the border closure, financial, human resourcing, supply lines, literally being able to get to your client or your customer or client to be able to get to you. So all those challenges. I suppose for me, what I wrote down was, and I'm happy to, you know, just speak informally for a few moments, and then if there's questions there, feel welcome to raise them with me. But what sits on my mind is obviously central to my mind is the impact on our community, impact both business but also our broader community. And what I wrote down was just how do we respond, or what does response look like? And for me, that's at two levels. One is I suppose at the jurisdictional level, and then there's also at the community level. Certainly at the jurisdictional level, that's where my role obviously is important in that regard. But one comment I would say is that it's, for me, I'm a big believer in making sure that we're using as many voices or as many channels as we can in that regard. You know, seeing Jason there make a presentation before, thanks Jason, but if Hansen Yuncken's got a direct channel through to government at some point, it might be the planning minister, you know, utilise those channels. The more people, the more awareness we create at higher levels, the better in that regard. And we've seen that through the actions of Northside Business New South Wales. Andrew Cottrell obviously has been doing a lot of good work there, escalating issues and bringing that to the attention of government. You know, that's for me, yes, that's my role, but the more voices we can employ, the better in that regard. Part of my role in that regard, or as I say it, there's a few different levels there. One is putting out spot fires, which there was any number of those at the moment, but even say over the last 24 hours, that's been actually being in direct contact with businesses and then liaising straight through to government in that regard. What's probably for me probably the bigger element is obviously around advocacy in that regard, and that's certainly happy to talk a bit more around what we were talking before the meeting, Carrick. But you know, advocacy is certainly very much a big part there. You know, for example, the health minister, the border closure was announced probably 4 or 5 weeks ago now on a Monday morning. The Premier rang me and said, I don't have good news for you. That was after I'd sent her a text saying, don't close the border. And she said, the news is the border's closing. Later on that day, the health minister rings and says, the Premier wants me to ask you or get your input as to how to define essential workers. And that's at that point where I said, well, you can't define essential workers, Minister. You've got people that are travelling across the border to and from work. Every job's an important job in that regard. So it's pushing, you know, it's pushing back, it's challenging government to be thinking about the impacts. And I know there's, you know, when we see things like Thursday night and the public health order, I know that leads to a lot of frustration, but there's also a lot of pushing, you know, a lot of advocacy in the background to try and act on those impacts. The big thing for me too is also obviously around the process itself. And again, early on in the piece, firstly there wasn't visibility, or there wasn't an understanding as to who you could go to in terms of government, who was having carriage. So Department, Premier, Cabinet, Cross-Border Commissioner, Service New South Wales, there was these different entities, but one of the things that we pushed for early on in the piece was make sure, well, who is it that we do need to be, for the community to be going through in that regard? And that's where the Cross-Border Commissioner was elevated early on in the piece. One of the things that we had to chase was making sure we're getting briefings to other members of Parliament, getting briefings to local councils. So it's certainly been a very challenging time in that regard. But there's, you know, it's making sure that we continue to push and advocate for, you know, for the impacts on the local level. Thursday night, you know, for me, that this latest iteration of the public health order has been probably one of the most frustrating experiences in that regard, because after earlier iterations, I pushed government to make sure that they were seeking to improve communication. What came out Thursday night was, you know, a health order that had to be executed, and then, well, didn't have to be, but it was executed and implemented with no time to give awareness to the community, no briefing coming out. So for me, there's you know, that was an extremely frustrating experience, and I know that frustration is borne out in the community there as well. But that's where we were also talking before the meeting, I suppose, is the other part of my role is the perspective that you bring from what's happening at the local community, but the perspective then of also what's happening at the higher level. And we're talking before about, you know, we're facing a pandemic that is obviously smashing across the globe, and the impact that that's having on every jurisdiction and how they're responding to it. So, you know, certainly I'm extremely conscious of the impacts at our local level, but I'm also can see, you know, I suppose from a bigger perspective, what's happening, how you know, how government's been confronted with this and how they're having to respond. And it's an environment that obviously is the environment they're working in would be one that has an element of being reactive, has an element of being you know, highly stressful, highly scrutinised environment, and that impacts on obviously decision making in that regard. So overall, that's at the macro level. For me, what I would say is to our business community that that we are pushing as much as we can on the impacts for our community. We're trying to employ as many channels as we can in that regard. And I want, you know, it's important to know that is happening. And for the business community, please feel welcome to reach out to us in that regard. Feel welcome to keep reaching out to Carrick. Carrick knows that, you know, he can reach out to us at any time in that regard. But also, for me, I had a great piece of advice actually from one of the leaders of our business community last week, and he said, you know, keep controlling the controllables. So for the local business community, this doesn't, you know, this is certainly not something that I want to seem trite or anything like that, but, you know, keep looking after yourselves in terms of your own well-being and your business in what is an extremely testing time. that's an important role of Northside in that regard, is the work that you do in terms of reaching out to your community, your members in that regard. So that's I suppose just a brief little bit. One question that's probably burning is around business support. The Premier is highly conscious about the need for business support. That certainly follows on from the meetings that the Small Business Minister had here in Albury just recently. Again, that's meant pushing Treasury, not the Treasurer's office, but Treasury on this. The latest response I had was yesterday, is that they're hopeful of being able to announce something this week in that regard. I appreciate that that's that's something that's important to our business community, and we continue to work on that as well. So thank you, thank you to our business community for, as I said, what is an extremely testing time. I'm certainly happy to take questions, Carrick, and certainly happy to stay on the line for a while longer as well.
Great, thanks, Justin. Yeah, look, we've got a couple of questions here. I might actually just shoot to one that we received from Andrew Kotzer at Kotzer. He said his background is that their business operates in from a base in a regional area, obviously, and their activities are all based in regional areas, but different states. So he says, I know many other industries, e.g. primary industry with activities such as fruit picking and shearing, etc. His question is, have governments seriously considered the regional lockdowns to deal with COVID-19 as opposed to locking down the state borders? So I guess there's a very strong commentary running around the community of, okay, well, can we manage Melbourne better? Can we isolate the hotspots better, as opposed to going to a state level and yeah. So has the government had these similar conversations, and can you offer any insight into that?
Yeah, and I would certainly agree with Andrew there. I think right from the get-go, I think very early on in the piece, I think it was Federal Health Minister Hunt had said we'll look to ring fence it where it arises, and then when you look at ring fencing, if ring fencing means along a state border, I don't think that was my sense of what ring fencing should look like in that regard. Probably. I completely agree with Andrew. I would have, for me, it would have been, when it first escalated in Melbourne, to be able to somehow contain it in Melbourne would have been what I would have, I think would have been an approach. I think a couple of things. One is, for better or for worse, it's been, it's been right from the get-go. Again, the Commonwealth turned to the states and said, look, it's health matter, therefore it's jurisdictionally it'll be run by the states in that regard. I think from New South Wales's perspective, there was an awareness that the genie was out of the bottle in terms of Victoria, that there was that it wasn't just in Melbourne, but there was actually community regional transmission that was occurring as well. And I think a lockdown around Melbourne, tighter lockdown of Melbourne would have been what we all would have wanted in that regard. But my conversation to the Health Minister, they had concerns, firstly, that there was transmission out in the regions. In Victoria, they also had concerns that it said that there wasn't a tight enough lockdown around Melbourne in that regard. So from the New South Wales perspective, its response was to say, well, we can only act in our jurisdiction, and therefore the only way we can contain it from our perspective as New South Wales as a state is to have a quarantine point, and in that sense to have that quarantine point as on the southernmost part of our jurisdiction in that regard. So Andrew, yeah, I agree. I look at it and I think, gosh, if we could have been able to ring fence it around Melbourne, that would have had to have occurred fairly early on in the piece. Probably before, say, Victorian school holidays and things like that, where there was transmission out into the regions. That's and I would hope that out of this COVID that they do look at moving forward, how do we contain pandemics, how do we contain emergencies, because this ain't going to be the last pandemic at the end of the day.
So, Justin, do you know if that's something that the New South Wales government is focusing on in terms of that regional containment model? Obviously, we might be stuck with the border closure for a period of time, but in terms of the way that the state government is approaching it from a New South Wales perspective, are they looking at following that kind of, that regional containment model?
Certainly, look, the model at the moment in New South Wales is, as you see what's happening up in Sydney at the moment, and that is to really rely upon strong contact tracing and to really seek and identify and contain where it's occurring in that regard. So, New South Wales is fortunate in that regard. It's some of the processes, some of the background around the public health unit model, which is different from Victoria in that regard, their ability to contact trace, touch wood, the test turnaround times, things like that, is allowing at this stage to continue with a model where they're really about seeking it out and identifying it and trying to contain it in that regard.
Yep. We've just had a comment here from Jen Weller. She says there's no assistance for long-term seasonal lecturers in our area. There's no job keeper, and if they have any contract at all, there's no job seeker. These casuals have been isolated from any kind of assistance. We need a plan to get jobs back in our regions. Just in education, there'll be many unemployed and many small or sole trader businesses dead.
Yeah, and thanks, Jen. And yeah, education, tertiary education is obviously right from the get-go, irrespective of border closure. Tertiary education has been one of the most severely impacted industries alongside hospitality, tourism in that regard. So, yeah, I don't have an easy answer there for Jen. I appreciate, Jen, your comments there in that regard. I think that's, and again, the tertiary education in that regard, I suppose again, it becomes one of those elements where the Commonwealth, the JobKeeper that didn't capture that. I don't have an easy answer there. Tertiary education is severely impacted and is going to be impacted for a period of time. I'm happy to keep, Jen, I'm happy to reach out and have a bit of conversation, see what we can be doing and reaching out for support. I think in that regard, we need to be talking to our Commonwealth colleagues on that as well, given that tertiary education falls under the Commonwealth.
Yeah, and it might be worthwhile if we can also facilitate pulling together a few of the industry leaders around here in the education training sector to kind of strengthen that voice as well. We've got another question here from Jeff Lowe. What is the state government thinking about the tenancy rules beyond the existing temporary arrangements?
Jeff, that's we'll seek extension on that. We'll seek, there's a couple of things again from a border community perspective versus the wider state perspective. There's things around, say, secondary education that we are chasing on in that regard. We are pushing, advocating for, again, consideration around, Jen mentioned the JobKeeper, around the Commonwealth, acknowledging that there are businesses that have been impacted and should have JobKeeper support that may not have been impacted by the first round of COVID, but now impacted because of the border closure. So tenancy is something else, Jeff, that happy to work on that in that regard as well. There needs to be, I suppose, the unique consideration of being a border community in that regard.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I guess for most of us who aren't really in the loop with the decision making around the border closure and the permit system, Justin, are you able to shed any light on how just the real basics of how that decision making is happening? Like, is from the conversations I've had with yourself and with other government officers, is that it's kind of coming down to the medical risk versus the economic risk. Is that a pretty fair assumption of the high level how these decisions are being made?
Yes, and in the sense though that I think I don't think that they're mutually exclusive at the end of the day, Carrick. I think you look at, again across the globe. I think there was probably in the United States early on in the piece a sense that we're going to not focus so much on the health aspect, and we're going to try and maintain the economy. And we can see that irrespective, you still have massive economic impact in that regard. I know when they look at, say, the model in Sweden, where they sort of had a laissez-faire approach to the health management, the economic impact in Sweden is just as severe in Germany as in Germany, where they had a tighter focus on health. And this is the issue: is at the end of the day, your decisions are going to impact both on the health and the economy in that regard. We are severely impacted here on the border at the moment, but at the same time, that is both a health and an economic decision for New South Wales, and the heavy impact we wear here is hopefully that safeguards New South Wales and for me actually the broader nation, both economically and from a health perspective. We look at the number of cases occurring in Victoria, and if it wasn't being contained to Victoria in that regard, the damage both from a health perspective and an economic perspective across not just New South Wales but across the rest of the nation would be quite catastrophic.
Yeah. I guess, with this latest iteration of the border permit system, it seems to have pretty obviously hit critical services the most, especially those critical services who are operating outside that border region. Is there any kind of advice that you can give to those critical services who are really struggling with being able to operate at the moment, in terms of, I guess it's going to come back to advocacy? I think one of the first things that you said is pretty key in this, which was actually going to be one of the questions. What can we all do individually to help strengthen the collective voice? Is there anything in particular that you can suggest or recommend to those in the critical services to lobby for, some kind of reform of the permit system?
Yeah, to the point there, Carrick, if you've got a channel, whether it be through Master Builders, Australian Industry Group, Business New South Wales, we're actually again, one of the things we've been chasing for is that two-way communication. And I think that I suppose going back to your previous question, a lot of this is being driven out of the Ministry of Health and the New South Wales Health Department. Certainly the public health orders at the end of the day are a legal instrument by health, and we need to be getting advocacy aimed at health in that regard. So we're certainly, well, today, for example, we've got the Small Business Minister sitting down with Business New South Wales and Master Builders and Australian Industry Group and New South Wales Farmers. So again, we're trying to create those opportunities where industry can be talking directly to government. But if you've got a channel that you can utilise that channel. We're continuing to push, obviously, on, firstly, I think in terms of the critical services, at two levels. One is to get that border community adjusted. Postcodes such as Colcan's postcode should be included. Yak and Dander is another one. I do get, and again, this is having a business perspective, I suppose that the more we expand things, we know that there is an element of risk associated with it. We mightn't see that so much up on the northeast, but you don't have to be moving too much further down the river. We're starting to get into contact. If you're at Cobram and Baruga, you're only sort of 3/4 of an hour or so away from Shepparton. Shepparton's got cases of COVID occurring. and that's what I mean when it comes to, that there are regional cases out there in Victoria, but expanding the border community, and then secondly, how we can set up a system so that organisations such as Jason there with Hansen Yuncken, they're not alone though. Talking say Southern Cross builders, Johnny Tyrrell, they've got the same situation where they've got project managers, they've got projects that are occurring away from that border community. We need to find a way that we can treat that. Hello.
Good morning. I guess we probably should let you get back to it soon, but just one final question for you, Justin, before we wrap up. Are you able to share any key takeaways from the forum yesterday with Minister for Local Government Shelley Hancock and the Cross-Border Commissioner James McTavish?
Yeah, look, it was, for me, it was a constructive meeting. Again, it was, people might say, well, the local government minister's not directly involved in health, involved in that decision making, but she becomes now another person who has increased awareness of the impacts that it's having on the border. She has, again, that direct ear to the health minister and the direct ear to the premier around the cabinet table. So this is, so I think it was a really important perspective in that regard. For me, obviously, the proof will be in the pudding. I'd like to think that there are 3 or 4 takeaways around, again, that border community size or the area of that border community, disability workers, other workers that got impacted by this latest change, such as childcare workers. There is no treatment for relocating into New South Wales. That's been something that I've been pushing on now for probably 3-4 weeks. That got raised yesterday, so I'd like to see that there is a remedy to that as well. The beauty of yesterday's meeting too was that it wasn't just the local government minister there, but there was a senior bureaucrat from within New South Wales Health present. They're the people that we need to be getting them to get a better appreciation of the impacts that on our community.
Yep. And just finally, a bit of a note of support here from Phil Clements in a masked kind of way. Why doesn't the state government recognise that Justin, Clancy and other local community leaders such as mayors, councillors, etc. Can contribute to a workable solution to border issues rather than seemingly ignoring them and dealing with it at Sydney level. So I guess what Phil's getting at there is, we all appreciate your work that you're doing. If there's anything that we can help, you get your message through, I guess that's what we're here to do as well. So it's a two-way street. We're looking for your support, your continued support, and if there's any opportunities that we can help you get your voice heard, then I think we really need to act on that. So we might wrap it up for now, Justin. Thank you so much for your time. I think on behalf of everybody, we can pretty confidently say we're very grateful for your continued support and advocacy for the region. It's very challenging times, and there's some very significant impacts that we're all feeling from it. But I think if we can, like you said, keep supporting each other, whether that's on a personal or professional level, I think that's very important, and we extend that support to you, Justin. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Carrick. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Righto, we'll wrap it up for there this morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Just a couple of quick final announcements before we end the meeting. If you do know anybody or if you are yourself looking for office space for rent, we actually have 2 spaces here at Chamber Hub, so please get in touch with myself. Coming up on our calendar, I guess our 12-monthly calendar at Chamber, we've got board nominations. Our AGM will be in mid-October, and board nominations will begin in September. So if you or you know somebody who would be a good candidate to help lead the Albury Northside Chamber of Commerce, now is a great time to put your hand up. So please contact me directly if you have any interest around that or any questions. In terms of events, like I said, they're all online at the moment for the foreseeable future, but we've got some pretty cool stuff happening as well. Something in the pipeworks to compensate for our flagship event, the Business After Hours, a networking event. So watch this space. We're going to have some fun with that. But coming up in the immediate future, we've got on the 31st of August, we've got Project Management in Action. They will be, their topic is what methodologies and tools are you using? So you can register for that on our events page of our website. On the 13th of August, we've got Business Bites with Kevin Bascom from the BEC Business Advice on 2-page business plan. Pretty relevant right now considering all the changes that businesses are faced with at the moment. And on the 8th of September, we've got our next Business Before Hours. So I'd just like to thank everybody again for your time this morning. We hope that you have gotten something practical and useful out of this. I think in terms of messaging from us at Chamber, keep supporting one another. You're all doing a great job in supporting the community in your own individual ways in business. Business is the backbone of the community. There is a lot of pressure that we do understand that you're under at the moment to keep families employed, to keep people in the region. And it's a tough slog, but I think together, you know, we can make a difference. So we've just got to keep at it. We'll keep fighting the good fight for you, and please contact any one of us at the team, any one of the team here at Albury Northside, if we can help you in any kind of way. So thank you again, and enjoy your days, everybody. Good morning.